And away we go. It's the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com, also brought to you in part by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Check out their DFS offering, some management fee free, easy for me to say, contests over there each and every day. You also get some fun, different roster construction, different pricing. And of course, I've said it many times over, you'll want to be over there for NFL. So why not get used to it as of right now? Dan Strafford, Dave Lockren with you on this Wednesday morning. We have a 14-game main slate as we get ready for the July 4th holiday. They stack up the night, and then you get a mixed slate on July 4th itself. Happy almost 4th of July. My PSA every year, don't be stupid with fireworks. We're grown adults. Don't do stupid things. But anyway, Dave, how the hell are you doing?
Well, I can tell you this much.
Uh-huh.
I'm getting some fireworks. I'm getting some fireworks.
Are you going to do dumb things with them, or are you going to?
I mean, I don't know if I'm going to be smart. I'm not going to Pierre Paul it, but
yeah, don't hold on to it too long.
But I'm going to have some fun. I can tell you that much.
Just
yeah. Are you going to the DC 4th of July show?
Yeah, I actually booked my ticket earlier this week.
I thought you would be the guy that would have been out there real quick.
I actually got my – never mind.
Are you going to say you got him from the RNC?
I was going to say that I got my USA flag tuxedo dry cleaned earlier this week, but I decided against it. Nonetheless, Dave and I, 6 years, you can get the jokes at a later date. But we have a 14-game slate. It's a deep one. We're going to go through pitching as we always do. We had some rainouts on Tuesday night, which are going to influence this slate. We also have July 4th, so we have some day games on July 4th that will influence these as well. Quick reminder, as always, we have you covered over at Awesemo.com. If you want to become a member, it's using the promo code EARLYBIRD. Pretty straightforward, one word. And that also gets you access not only to the deep dive, which Adam and Dave write each and every day, gets you access to the projections, the ownership projections, the lineup builder, and then you can add on Fantasy Cruncher as well. If you just want to listen and you just want to watch, we are more than happy to have you over on YouTube and on SoundCloud, iTunes, and across all those podcasting apps. Do us a big favor. Like the videos, subscribe to the channel, set up the alerts, do the same over on the podcasting apps as well. Leave comments, share it with friends, share it on social media, tag me and Dave when you do share it. We'd love to see that as well. So we have a 14-game slate. Pricing is pretty compact on DraftKings. We'll use FanDuel as well where we see it necessary. We'll do our best to hit on all the pitchers that have some upside, and then we'll talk about some top stacks. Obviously, Coors is on this slate, so that will be a key takeaway from what we're talking about, Dave. But I guess we can always start 10K or above. You had Chris Sale against Toronto. David Price had a pretty good outing on Tuesday night. Walker Buehler at 10-9 against Arizona. And Domingo Germán is back for the Yankees. He is at 10-1 and gets a matchup in Queens with the New York Mets. Germán had been out with a hip injury and is expected to rejoin the rotation. I believe he's already been activated, but it may be just a procedural thing that they'll activate him at some point on Wednesday before this game. Now, we can talk about Clevenger and Gray and Gibson and Trinos and Canning below, but just to differentiate here and talk about these three first, Sale against Toronto seems to be in a fairly prime spot, 11-8, a tough price point to deal with on a Coors slate. Buehler 10-9, Germán 10-1. Any of these guys in your early plans here, or do you see yourself on a 14-game slate trying to save a couple of bucks and get sub 10K in a different matchup?
You know, Sale labored a little bit last time out against Toronto, and his following start wasn't great. It's funny, when he was incredibly well, his price point stayed the same or went down. You know, now you've got him up around 12K, which is where he should be. But paying for him here is a lot of it's gonna come down to what the other pitching looks like, right? And we've got 14 games here, which is very rare for a Wednesday. There are a few guys that we'll talk about down towards the bottom. Not a ton. It is a Coors slate, but with Chris Sale, like if you can afford him, if you're all right getting him in the lineups, if it works, you know, there've been a lot of cheap stacks out there that make expensive pitching work. One of them yesterday would have been the Tampa Bay Rays. They were cheap. excuse me, I don't know where they're at right now, but the St. Louis Cardinals were one of those teams that was, dirt cheap that people were going to stack based on that alone. There will be options there. And I think it really just comes down to what you're trying to do. I think Sale is perfectly fine. You're talking about a Toronto team that has, I believe a top 10 K rate against left-handed pitching. They have some of the lowest WRC plus weighted on base average against lefties. So it's definitely a spot where Sale can exploit it. And just because he struggled once against them, and by struggle, I mean 3 runs and 8 Ks across 5 innings, doesn't mean that, you're not going to be interested in him here. This guy, is probably going to finish this season top 5 in like every single relevant category. And that's exactly what we're looking at. And that's what we're looking for. He's got a 14.3% swinging strike rate, 35 almost percent called plus swinging strike rate, which is just outrageous, and a 35.5% strikeout rate, which if you were to eliminate Clevenger, who's only made 4 starts, and then you got Chris Sale that leads the slate by 5%. Actually, no, it leads it by 7.5%. That should tell you enough of what you need to know about why he is worth the money and why he's such a good play. Now, look, Walker Buehler's an interesting one. The strikeouts have been a lot more plentiful lately outside of that one start at Coors where, I think all of us are willing to give him a pass there. He struck out 16 Rockies prior to that, but in L.A. He's been phenomenal in that respect, and you're starting to see him really come around. His K rate on the season is up to 27.2%. His swinging strike rate is 12%, but he gets a ton of called strikes as well. He's got an xFIP that's low to mid 3s against lefties and righties.
His walk rate's below 4%.
Exactly. That's right.
It's so good.
He's walking righties at 2%, lefties at 4.8%. It's really hard not to like him. And his whip against lefties and righties, both of them, Dan, is below 1.
Yep.
So, if Sale's coming in with all the ownership and Buehler is going to be completely ignored, then I'm all right with it. He went – that last start he had against Arizona was one of the best starts we've seen. 8 1-run innings, 11 Ks, 41 fantasy points. Man, when you're talking about a ceiling, man, his ceiling right now is as high as anybody else. He's got a 41, a 34, and a 53 just over his last 5 starts.
Yep, and he's a guy that, again, disclaimer, when I talk WOBA minus X WOBA, it's not trying to project out what's to come, but what has happened. And he had a WOBA over his first 1,500 pitches of 263 and expected WOBA of 278, so not that far apart. So he's getting the contact and the giving up the hits and the expected results pretty in line. So it's not like there's any sort of outward or inward sort of variance here that would say something's not quite right. Everything is working for Buehler. He's got the 4-seamer doing what it did last year, and he seems to have overcome a lot of the problems he saw maybe in 2 or 3 starts that made a lot of people get a little bit scared of what might come this season. But he's just been absolutely dynamic. And in these whip sites where walks and hits really can bog you down, it's great to see Buehler doing great work. At the top end, talk through Sale.
By the way,
yep,
I've mentioned this a few times, but people are always talking about pitch count for Dodger pitchers. If you really take a look, outside of Kenta Maeda, they have not been on nearly as tight of a leash when they're pitching well. Ryu is got 93, 116, 106, 104, 99, 107. Last start he got blown up, but that had more to do with him being terrible at Coors than it did with him, just being limited. Walker Buehler, it's not something I worry about. 111, 100, 102. Like the lowest in his last 10 is 91, 96, 100, 99, 99, 97. To me, that's pretty encouraging. And when you look at a similarly priced Domingo Germán, he's averaging fewer than 6 innings pitched per start this year. He's gone 7 innings or more than 6 innings only once all season. Meanwhile, Walker Buehler has gone 7+ innings in 1, 2, 3, 4, of his last 5 and 6 of his last 9. So, or 6 of his last 10 with 6 innings or more pitched in like, what? I don't know. Because you remember, he got off to an ugly start at the beginning of the season. But recently, not only has he been electric, but he's been efficient too. And that's important to me.
Absolutely. Makes a ton of sense. And I do think it's worth noting about the Dodgers, your point of in the past, we have seen Dave Roberts get out there quickly to pull his pitchers. But if it is not the trend this year, it's something at least worth noting and keeping track of as you roll forward. As we do that here, you talked about Herman. Mike Clevenger is a guy who got absolutely beat up last time out. Coming back from injury against Texas was okay, 7 Ks, 3 walks. But against the Baltimore Orioles, give up 7 earned runs, a home run.
I really liked him too.
So I had him everywhere. I started him in all my season long. I had him in DFS. And he's a guy that, again, small sample size, but you look at his xFIP compared to his ERA, his xFIP somewhere in the 2s, his ERA over 5. I don't think his last start is in any way indicative of who Mike Clevenger is, and he gets a matchup here with the Kansas City Royals, a team that doesn't strike out a ton. They are 21.2% on the year. They're 98 WRC plus. Do you like Clevenger at all in this matchup, or do you find yourself gravitating to someone on the cheaper end of the spectrum, maybe a Gibson, a Darvish, or a somebody at the mid-7s as we roll through?
You know, it's funny because his velocity was actually up.
Yep.
I think he was sitting 90, almost 98. Let me see. His average, he was sitting 97. Yeah, like that's crazy. I don't know what it is. And he's touching we touched 99.7. Like that was not the issue. So I'm just going to chalk it up as a bad start. But at the same time, I don't really think it's necessary to go here, right? Against Texas, the 7 strikeouts were encouraging. But that last start against Baltimore, even though I'm chalking it up as a bad start, I'd still rather just pay a little bit more for Walker Buehler or go all the way up to Chris Sale. I also don't think it's crazy to consider Sonny Gray. I mean, he's just been very, very good against lefties this season, and almost Milwaukee's power is almost exclusively left-handed. So, is it a somewhat dangerous matchup? Sure, I don't think anybody's going to deny that. But in the same breath, Sonny Gray is limiting them to a point. He has a .95 WHIP and a 2.9 xFIP against lefties this year, with 31.4% strikeouts against lefties. His arsenal really suits him well when it comes to facing opposite-handed hitters. I get that it's risky, and I definitely wish he was cheaper. But Sonny Gray's been very good this year. He's done a very good job of managing runs at Great American Ballpark. So I don't see myself prioritizing Gray at that price point. But I think I'd probably take him over Clevenger if I had to take one in that 9K range.
Makes sense to me. I think that as you try to look through here and you're trying to project out what could happen, Sonny Gray against Milwaukee in a bandbox scares the hell out of me. I do think he's been very solid on the year and has been limiting a lot with some of his secondary pitches. So I do like Gray overall, but I think Clevenger is the guy I'd go to in the 9K range. Gibson, though, against Oakland, Chirinos, Canning, Darvish. Let's go down to Means, Kelly, and Wainwright. Is that all above 8K? That's all above 8K. Oh, we have Jason Vargas in here too. Any of these guys stand out? I can't imagine Canning faring well in the hot temperatures of Globe Life Stadium. Chirinos against Baltimore, I guess, stands out a bit because Baltimore has struggled on the year. Gibson, I know Oakland does strike out at a decent clip, not as much against righties as they do against lefties at 21.1%, good for 23rd overall on the season. Any of these guys, before we head on into the mid-tier, stand out to you as potential plays?
No, not really. Oakland's striking out around 21% on their active roster versus righties. Gibson's very much a hit-or-miss type of pitcher, but this doesn't feel like the spot where you really want to go heavy on him, even if a lot of these Oakland bats have struggled. Chirinos, that price is getting up there. But he has had quite the leash as a starter now. It is Baltimore. It's not the craziest idea, But the problem I have with Chirinos is, even though I respect him and think he's a pretty solid pitcher, you're paying that much for a guy that has a strikeout rate of 22%. It's really not that encouraging. He is striking lefties out at 22%. Sorry, on the season, he's striking only 21% of batters out and 20% of righties. He doesn't walk a lot. He doesn't give up a lot of base runners, but it definitely feels like you'd be overpaying for Chirinos. I'd honestly go to Sonny Gray. And it's not even that I love Sonny Gray. It's just ahead of Chirinos, ahead of Griffin Canning, who's going to have to battle against, a healthy Joey Gallo and a bunch of lefties at Globe Life, where temperatures will almost certainly be, eclipsing 90 degrees. Let's see here. I'll tell you right now, Globe Life Park is going to be, 91.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's not ultra friendly for pitching. Darvish is too expensive against Pittsburgh. I actually don't understand how he has a price tag like that, given the entirety of this season he's been mediocre. He gets a good amount of strikeouts, right? You're always going to get the strikeouts, but he's going to walk a lot of batters, and he's going to struggle to get through 6 innings. So at 8,600 against one of the lowest bottom 3K rate in the league versus righties, now I don't see myself getting the Darvish either. And it's funny because John Means been talking about this guy for a while now. I know Adam has too. He has a very good changeup.
Yep.
It's about time we start, having some respect for the guy, but not $8,400 worth of respect.
Yeah, and I think we've talked many times over about the DK pricing, but on this slate in Tampa Bay, and that's an upside for Means. You talk about the Trop and that being a better place to pitch, obviously. But this Tampa Bay lineup has some pop and has some definite upside against lefties on the year. The Rays are 25.6% K percentage. That is good for 5th overall. A WRC plus below 100 at 96, and ISO at 155. Maybe Means may convince me otherwise. I have one name all the way down at the bottom that we're going to get to eventually, who I think is just priced too cheaply on this slate for the matchup.
Quantrill?
It's got to be. He's going to be massively owned even on a 14-game slate.
He probably will be.
We'll get to. We can talk about him whenever, obviously. But I believe that. I just think it's a misprice. 5K, maybe 62, maybe 65. But a 5K flat, and no, it's not the min over on DK. I understand that. But in a matchup in San Diego, which is still a hitter's neutral park, I know it's gotten better over the years than it was probably 5 years ago when it was known as a strictly pitcher's park. But the San Francisco offense is putrid, and I know they had a big game the other night, and fine. But 5K seems like the wrong price point, the cheapest pitcher on this slate overall. Means I might come back to. Means is somebody that I think in the Trop against the Tampa Bay team that strikes out a decent amount against lefties, I might take a second glance there. But what do you got rest of the way? Now we get into the dicey area where we're talking about Mike Leake against St. Louis, Archer against the Cubs. Our good friend Wade Miley is pitching in Colorado. Anderson against San Diego maybe has some upside because the Padres strike out a ton. Nick Pivetta is down to 6,200 after Aaron Nola went out, pitched very well against the Atlanta Braves. Any of these pitchers elicit any sort of feeling where you might even want to discuss them as potential options for Wednesday's slate?
I think the reason that Quantrill will be relatively popular is because this is a 14-game slate, and almost every one of the guys that we've discussed outside of that 10K plus range has some warts.
Yep.
I'm not going to Merrill Kelly against the Dodgers. He's been good, but the Dodgers are super potent, especially from the left side. Wainwright against Seattle. And Wainwright's been pretty respectable. I still don't see how I could pay that much for him. It's really tough. And he's even gotten strikeouts recently. It's all getting called strikeouts. He has a 7.3% swinging strike rate, which compared to the rest of this slate, to 27 other pitchers, is second worst. It's tied with Tanner Anderson, Peter Lambert, and is worse than Chacín, Jurado, Mike Leake, and Jason Vargas. Chew on that. That's not pretty. And then Vargas against the Yankees. Yeah, I'll pass on that. I still don't buy into Jason Vargas, even though he continues to impress and surprise. I'll let someone else pay $8K for him. Reed Foley against Boston? No. Leake against St. Louis? I mean, do you really want to go to Mike Leake here? These guys are just such low upside options. Bryce Wilson, I don't like this spot much either. I don't know how many pitches he's going to throw. I skipped intentionally over Archer because he might be the one guy that I would be willing to consider. And the reason for this is that the Cubs, I mentioned it yesterday with Musgrove, the Cubs only have 3 lefties that they can put in their lineup unless they put the switch-hitting Caratini in over Contreras. So Archer's going to have a matchup against 6 righties, and against right-handed hitting this season, he's striking them out at 25%. Walks have been an issue. Home runs have been an issue, no question. Just allowing base runners have been an issue. But he's always been better against righties. He's always been better at preventing power against righties. Archer could be the one guy that you look to in a pitcher-friendly park like PNC and say, all right, I'm okay with that. You know, he's $1,000 less than Darvish and $700 less than John Means. You can make a very good argument that Archer is one of the better priced options just based on how everyone else is priced. Because look, Miley in Colorado, Duffy in a tough matchup with Cleveland. Yeah, like you said, I think you could give Anderson a look. But I mean, that's really just because he's facing the heaviest K rate team in the league versus righties. It's not because you think he's good.
Right.
And look, he's done a good job at keeping runs off the board, but he's also just been so underwhelming from a strikeout standpoint that if they do get to him and he does give up some runs, it's going to be a very, very ugly outing because I don't see any way that he's going to be able to mitigate that damage. That would be one of the things. I mean, hell, I talked about Tyler Beatty. I know Alex and Adam both had interest as well. The game's still in progress. But, I mean, if I'm willing to talk about him and roster him, then, of course, Anderson at least comes into the mix as somebody worth considering. And then finally, above 6K, do you roster Nick Pivetta? It's a very tough question. Aaron Nola went 8 scoreless, 8K frames against him, but Aaron Nola is markedly better than Nick Pivetta. And Aaron Nola is a control pitcher. Those are the type of guys that can really get to Atlanta because when they're not swinging and missing, they're still going down looking. And Nola did a great job of that yesterday, just keeping them completely off balance and getting the called strikes that he needed. Not sure if Pivetta can do that, and I worry about it when you're facing a good, disciplined, power-laden Atlanta Braves offense.
The one thing I will point out, and I will admit that I'm a bit of a Tyler Beatty apologist, but Beatty, a more prominent prospect than Sean Anderson ever was, more strikeout upside in the minor leagues. So I don't disagree that if you're talking Beatty on the premise of the matchup and the park, that Anderson needs to follow. But I do think there's more upside long-term for Tyler Beatty over Sean Anderson.
I'll give you a better example. I played Jeff Samardzija the night before.
There you have it. There you have it for sure. I think Cal Quantrill at the bottom of the heap here we talked about in passing and more in depth at 5K is just going to be probably in the 20% owned range, if not higher in certain areas, because just the price point, Colorado, and the opponent. I know he's been out of the bullpen for the past few weeks, and maybe that's where the price point's coming from. They think he's only going to throw 60 pitches or so. He's part of the rotation. I think he's going to go out there and throw as many pitches as he can. The Padres are going with a 7-man rotation heading into the All-Star break, so they have arms that are out there that can throw a couple innings if need be. I think. What would you guess? I know you're not huge on trying to guess ownership in baseball, but would you say mid-20s on ownership for Quantrill in smaller stakes GPPs?
Yeah, it sounds about right to me. I'm curious to see if Tyler Alexander gets any ownership. He's also very cheap in 73 2/3 AAA frames this year. He struck out 26% of batters, 10.6 per 9.
Sure.
Walked batters only 5% of the time. The whip was a little bit alarming, especially with a low walk rate, which tells you that he is going to give up hits. But he also had a 380 BABIP, which isn't, like his ERA was very high. His xFIP was much lower, almost 2 runs lower than his ERA. 6.23 ERA, 4.45 xFIP. I think that does kind of speak volumes here. I don't know a ton about the guy, obviously, but what I do know is that once you get down this far, facing a White Sox team that might not strike out as much as they used to, but still is far from top of the pack as far as capabilities go at the plate. I think Alexander is at least somebody that we'd be better, or we'd be wise to at least look into it. He is a lefty. The White Sox on the season against left-handed pitching have a 102 WRC plus, which ranks smack dab in the middle of the league.
Yes, sir.
Their 24.6% strikeout rate, however, has been climbing recently, is now on the active roster the 7th highest K rate in baseball. So there are potential strikeouts there. They walk only 6.5% of the time against lefties. They don't have a lot of speed on the base paths. If we're talking cheap pitching and you wanted to get away from a guy in Quantrill who you're just playing because it's San Francisco, not because he's good, maybe Alexander's somebody to look at against the White Sox.
Yeah, the White Sox since May 1st have the second worst K percentage against lefties at 25.6%, just behind the Rangers. Again, sample sizes matter, and I'm just picking a random date there to see where they were at. But as Dave was saying, trending in the wrong direction against left-handed pitchers in that active roster. It will be a fun one. This is one that in the mid-tier and the low tier, you're going to have some giant question marks. You can always have fun remembering when Ross Detweiler was never a good pitcher. He's just back in the majors somehow or another. But nonetheless, it's going to be a fun one to determine exactly where we're going with the starting pitchers, and a lot of that will depend on where we go with offense. So quickly here, Dave, as we close out the pod, stacks perspective, where you think the most ownership will be, where you feel most comfortable. Do you turn to Coors immediately with Lambert on the mound for the Colorado Rockies and Wade Miley for the Houston Astros? I assume Arenado could be 40% owned in certain places against the lefty in Coors Field, but what do you got for some of your favorite stacks in offensive plays?
Yeah, Wade Miley's a tough one, man. It's super tough to try and predict what you're going to get out of Wade Miley or against him. And on the season, it would be an understatement to say that he's been impressive. He's been very impressive this year. He doesn't allow a lot of base runners or runs. He doesn't get a ton of strikeouts either. But Wade Miley in the rotation for Houston, he's been huge, man. He's given them a chance to win every 5 days. That's not to say that Arenado and Story aren't both, really outstanding options. But to say that maybe a stack isn't the greatest thing here, I don't know if I'm looking to just go and full out stack the Rockies everywhere. I mean, Of course, you're going to have plenty of exposure to them because it is Coors Field, and we've seen just.
Have you looked at the over under yet? Have you looked at what the number is?
No.
Do you want to guess?
Sure. I'll say I'm going to guess that Miley isn't getting a lot of respect.
Yes, that would make sense why I asked. Yes.
I'll say 12.5.
13.5.
Wow.
With Houston minus 130.
So Houston must have like a 7.5 run total.
That would be my guess. I haven't looked at implied totals, but yeah, I would say 7.2, 7.5, somewhere in there.
7.2. 6.4 for the Rockies. It's first and second respectively on the day. So, yeah, it says a lot. But here's the thing about Miley. He has a 58% ground ball rate against lefties, 51% against righties. If he's going to keep the ball on the ground, and granted, he's allowing 1.36 home runs per 9 to righties. So I definitely like Nolan Arenado. I definitely like Trevor Story. I just don't know how much I love this team as a stack. On the opposite side, I definitely have a whole lot of interest in the Houston Astros. Lambert has been anything but impressive. He has a 16% K rate, wildly underwhelming. 7.3% swing and strike rate, as we mentioned, is second lowest on the entire slate. There's a lot of – he has 83% contact rate. I mean, that's just brutal.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many aspects of this that that are not good at all. His contact rates are just rough. And now he has to go up against the Houston Astros. Yeah, I mean, 7.2 run total sounds about accurate to me.
Anywhere else you're leaning? I know I asked specifically about Coors in Houston. Any other bats that or stacks that interest you this early on?
So I guess it is Ariel Urado pitching for Texas. Obviously the Angels are just such a good offense. I like them quite a bit. Nick Pivetta gives up home runs. What's interesting is 5.8 run total for the Braves is very high here. Cincinnati against Chesney, and I haven't looked at their pricing, but they have a 5-run total. There are actually right now, get this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 14 teams with implied totals above 5.
That's impressive.
14, Dan. And 1, 2, 3, 5 teams don't have totals yet. Make that 15 because the Yankees are definitely going to have one against Vargas. And I bet the Rays have one against John Means.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Crazy.
Looking quickly at Cincinnati price points, Puig is up, Senzel is up, and Suarez is up at 4,700. So 4,700 and above for those three names. Votto's at 42, Dietrich at 44, Scooter Gannett is down at 3,900. So you have a mix and match sort of day there.
Yeah. All right.
And I'll point out Tommy La Stella left the Angels game with some sort of injury. Not that I haven't rostered him once this year. I know he's had a very fine season, but when thinking about the Angels, if he's not leading off, you may get a cheaper price point at the top or a mix-in of somebody who may have not been in the lineup of late simply because La Stella is out. Haven't seen another update, but he left because of an injury.
Okay. And one more team here just to throw out there would be the Dodgers. I'll stack them any night when you're getting outside of Bellinger and Muncy, whose price is down to 4,700 on DraftKings. You're getting really affordable prices. I don't know if Beede will be back in the lineup, but he's dirt cheap. Verdugo, Peterson's 4,300. Taylor 39. If Justin Turner's back in the lineup, he's 4K. Kike Hernandez 30. Like they're all really cheap. Merrill Kelly's been good, but this team can do damage against anyone. And at this price, at those prices, it's going to be really easy to fit the Dodger bats in.
Makes sense to me. Let's close it out there. Find Dave on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. Find him on SiriusXM Fantasy, Sirius 210, XM 87 every Saturday and Sunday as well. You can find me over on Twitter at Dan Strafford. Dave and I will be back with you Friday morning. That is July 5th. That will come after much pomp and circumstance. Thursday night, fireworks to be had, beverages to be imbibed. We will be with you, though, nonetheless. Friday morning, bring you up to speed. Emac and Adam are with you Thursday morning, and then you get Emac and Adam again Saturday right here on none other than the DFS Early Bird presented by Awesemo.com.